Hey guys, it's John with CheatSheetPros.com. Today is Friday, October 8th. I'm just getting over my head cold, and I noticed the video last week for the prize picks. It got a lot of views, so apparently a lot of people are interested in either prize picks or player props. So I wanted to go ahead and do another video and make the list of the games that I'm looking at. I can't log into prize picks on my desktop for some reason. Otherwise, I'd show you the 5-teamer that I put together for the week, but it had the Coastal Carolina running back. I think it's Shermani Jones over 14 fantasy points, and he ended up with 19. And then I had Darrell Henderson over 69.5 rush yards, and he ended with, I think, 77, somewhere between 75 and 80. So I've got 2 of the 5 done with some more coming in. So the ones I'm going to focus on today are rush yards, pass yards, and receptions. I have 5 marked down for college, but it's so difficult to pull all the stuff up to show you those. I'm just going to tell you what they are. So Traylon Smith over 72.5 rush yards versus Ole Miss. Ole Miss hadn't really played anyone, and they're giving up the 86th most rushing yards per game. That one popped out at me on the college football cheat sheet. And then Shermani Jones played last night. And then Alton McCaskill over 18 fantasy points. Jerome Ford over 19 fantasy points. And I'm looking at Mateo Durant, either rush yard prop, I couldn't find that, or fantasy points. Those are the college ones I'm looking at, but you have to be careful because if the teams win big, they might run 7 times and then sit them, or vice versa. So the Henderson over seemed like a lock. I mean, he was getting 18 carries a game, and then Seattle's rush defense was not very good. So he squeaked over that one. That was good. So let's look at some more. Let's start off with receptions. So the first one I want to look at is DJ Moore. So DJ Moore kind of jumped out at me because I own him in season long. So I've kind of been paying attention to see who the wide receiver 1 would be. But he's got a solid 8 targets each, or 8 catches each of the last 3 weeks on 12, and 11 targets. So his over-under for receptions is 6. So the reason I like that is because it's not 6.5. So 6 at least gives you a push, and that seems to be a floor for him so far this year. And 7 would be a win. So the odds of him having only 5 is less likely. So I like DJ Moore over 6 receptions. And you can see here on the cheat sheet that Philadelphia is 31st against the wide receiver 1. So I don't worry about any shadow coverage or bracket coverage on him. I think he's still going to be able to get his. And then when you come down here and look at DJ Moore's projections, they've got him at 5.8 for 81 yards, so roughly 6 for 81. So that's fine. Looking at that, I don't focus on projections a lot. I look at the stats and then the coverage. So 888, he's hit it 3 weeks in a row. So DJ Moore receptions over is one that I like. And then the guy I keep talking about is Laviska Shenault. His reception over under. Before I tell you that one, let's take a look at the stats. So when DJ Chark went down, this guy just got absolutely peppered with targets. So last week, he caught 6 of 7 balls for 99 yards. So I think that's a floor for him, and I think it'll go up from there. And even in week 1, he got 10 targets. He got 7 against a tough Denver team. Arizona's a tough defense. He caught 4 of 4. And then against Cincinnati, he caught 6 of 7. So I think he's going to be more in the 7 to 10 target range with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 catches. Well, his over-under for receptions is 5. And again, I like that. There's no hook. 5 is a push, so it doesn't hurt you. Him only getting 4 is a worry, but with DJ Chark done for the year, I don't worry about that at all. 5, 6, 7, I think, is the reasonable outcomes for him in a game where they're probably going to have to throw a lot to stay in this. Another one is Darnell Mooney. So watch the questionable tag, but he should practice. I think that's more of just a technicality. But his reception number was 4. Well, Justin Fields loves throwing to this guy. The first time Justin Fields came in, the first target was to Darnell Mooney. So that kind of red flagged me at that point. But last week, he caught 5 of 7 for 125 yards. So 4 catches is a push. I don't mind it. I don't have any Darnell Mooney over 4 catches yet, but that's one that I did earmark. Another one is Hunter Renfro. So he's pretty much the Julian Edelman of the Las Vegas Raiders. You saw him 8, 6, 7, 9. I mean, he's getting a decent amount of targets. He runs a lot of short routes, so I like his catches to be up there. And receptions, he's got 6, 5, 5, and 6. So I would assume 5 would be the number that Prize Picks would put on this. With 5 to 6 every game, that's pretty consistent. Well, when I pulled up Prize Picks, it was 4. So not 4.5, but 4. So 4 is a push. 4.5 I could understand because 4 would be a loss. But 4 being a push, that's not bad. And then let's move on. I'm going to try to hit as many of these as possible. So then we got Cole Beasley. So one thing I noticed here with Cole Beasley is his number was 5. Well, he's owning the slot, gets a lot of targets. Now, last week they won 40-0. He only got 2. The week prior, or 2 weeks prior, I guess, they won 35-0. He got 4. So these big blowout games, he's really not getting a lot of action. But these games that are close and somewhat high scoring, Washington 43-21, he caught 11 of 13. Pittsburgh week 1, he caught 8 of 13. His number is only 5, and they're playing Kansas City with an over-under of 56.5. So you've got to love that, especially if you hit your early tickets, and then you go into that Sunday night game, and you're like, I need Beasley for 5 catches. I mean, he could get 3 on the first drive. So that's one that I really do like this week. Let me grab a highlighter. I'm going to mark that one. So those are the reception ones that jumped out at me that I earmarked. Let's look at some passing yards wins. So Sam Darnold. So first, let's kind of take a look at it, and we've got them pulled up on the game back here. So defensively, both teams have been pretty good against the pass, but then both offenses have been really good at throwing the ball. So Sam Darnold, the last couple weeks, he's had 301 passing yards against Dallas, 304 against Houston, and 305 against a decent New Orleans team, and then 279 against the Jets. So what do you think his over-under number would be? My guess would be 280.5 is kind of where I would put it at. Well, when I pulled up Prize Picks last night, it was 250.5. And I was like, wow, I know Philadelphia is a good pass defense, but that's really good, especially if CMC comes back and he's throwing these screen passes that go for 30, 40 yards. They have a couple of them a game. I like over 250 passing yards. I mean, he's been over it every game this year. Saints are a pretty decent pass defense. Yeah, I mean, not bad at all. And then Davis Mills under was the next one that I had earmarked. So Davis Mills, poor guy, playing for one of the worst teams in the NFL. So he played Buffalo last week, which was a really good pass defense, and had 87 passing yards. And then the prior week played Carolina, who was decent, had 168. And then the first week, he only threw 8 of 18, so he was only in for part of that game, had 102. So let's look at these two games. So 87 versus a really good pass defense, 168 versus a decent pass defense. Now, his number is a 162.5. So that's a decent number. That's probably somewhere where I would put it. He's been over it and he's been under it, and they are likely going to be down. But let's take a look at it here in the cheat sheet. So one of the things that you notice, New England's pass defense right here, they're 4th at allowing the least amount of passing yards per game at 185. So that is outstanding for them. Sorry, I'm fighting a head cold. And then we've got it projected for about 215, or I'm sorry, 120, 215 total yards. So this is a little model. We're kind of skewing, don't pay attention to these numbers, but this is kind of what we're projecting as far as yardages and points. So we're projecting it somewhere around 120, possibly 140 passing yards. So under 162 is a decent one. New England is really good against the pass. You can see here they rank 3rd, 8th, and 3rd, and 4th versus the wide receiver 1, 2, the slot, and the tight end. So they're really good. I don't think they're going to give up a ton. And the other kickback on the other side is Houston gives up a bunch of rushing yards. So I think Damian Harris will have a big game running the ball, which means the clock keeps going, which means the total is lower, which means less opportunities for Mills to throw. And with the game that opened already at a low 41.5 and moved even lower to 39.5, I like under 162.5 in that one. The next one is Derek Carr. So let's pull up his number. So he's playing Chicago. And so last week against Chargers, he only had 196 passing yards. We're just going to call that an off game for him. They weren't ready for everything the Chargers threw at him. But look at his prior 3 games: 386 passing yards, 382, 435. These are ridiculous numbers, and Baltimore, Pitt, and Miami are decent pass defenses. So where do you put his number at if he's averaging over 380 and then has, a 200 one? So just in your head, what do you think his number's at? So pick a number, and I'll tell you what it is. His number is 277.5. So that's decent, but, going up against Chicago, it could be a game where they may or may not have to throw. So that's one I'm leaning on. I like some others better than that, but when he's hitting 380s, he could hit 277 by the end of the third quarter. So that's something that kind of interests me. Let's take a look at the pass defense for Chicago and see what it looks like. Now, Vegas is at home, so that's another reason I like it, is players always play better at home. Total 45, moved down to 44. Our projected passing yards for Carr is 319. So I don't mind that at all. Chicago pass defense, they're middle of the road, 238, 15th. But then there's sorry, I'm fighting a head cold. I got a headache. I'm struggling here. Vegas has the second most passing yards per game at 326. So we're projecting him about 319. You could say that's a little heavy, say, 290 to 310, but 277.5, I got to go over there. But again, I don't love it. That's one that I'm looking at, but definitely in consideration. And then Carson Wentz. So this is one that I earmarked to look at when I was doing the video, and I hadn't got around to doing the video yet. So his passing yards, he has 228, 194, 247, 251. So he is consistently right around that 230 to 250 number, with the exception of this game against Tennessee. And he's throwing 30 to 38 times per game. And then he's going up against Baltimore, who has a porous secondary. So you can see Baltimore has given up the 24th most passing yards per game at 273. And even though they're only averaging about 214 a game, they're giving up 273. This is going to drive his projection up a little more. And we know Baltimore is going to score. They have an elite offense. They're very efficient. So Indy's going to have to move the ball and stay in this game and throw. So we have him projected for about 242 passing yards. So I like Wentz to hit, 242 I think is fair, considering what he has done of 228, 194, 247, 251. So his number, I'm putting him at 242. I would expect his to be somewhere around there for the price pick, and it is 225.5. So he was over it last week. He was under it there. He was over it, and he was over it. So he's not killing that number, but 225 is really low against a team where they are going to have to throw the ball, and that is allowing 273 passing yards per game. I like the over there. Now, a lot of these are overs, but I do want to go ahead and hit on an under. And so Dak, this one worries me a little bit because PFF and everybody's got Dak as a big sleeper this year. So looking at his passing yards, now he's highly efficient. He's great for DFS. Look at this, 4, 3, and 3 touchdowns. He can throw it in the end zone, but they're typically up. They're running the ball a lot more with Zeke. They're doing some handoffs with CeeDee Lamb. They're not in a position where they need to air it out and throw for 400 yards. Now, this week 1 game against Tampa, he threw for 403, but let's go ahead and throw that game out the window. And he threw for 237, 238, 188 against the Chargers, the Eagles, and Carolina. So 180 to 230. So we could roughly say about 240 would be his, decent number. And that's by some miracle they get down. Now, Dallas over here, you can see, or the Giants, I apologize. They're 20th in passing yards allowed per game at 259. So this is going to project Dak about 269, somewhere in that ballpark. So looking at these last 3, he's did 237, 238, 188. We have him projected for 269. What do you think his number is on Price Picks? Well, his number is 274.5. So to me, I'm leaning under here because this is a game I think that they will be up. They can run the ball. They can run with Zeke. They're not going to be playing a huge shootout where they've got to play catch-up. Now, he could go over it. Dak's the perfect QB that could do it, but not likely. And then even down here on the projection, they've got him projected at 257, which is higher than what he's been averaging the last 3 games. So I like going under 274 there, if that gives you a little bit of a boost. Now let's move on to some rushing yards. Now these are my favorite ones to do, so I saved them for last. So Henderson was one. He played. He's not going to show up in here. So Henderson was the guy that played last night, and he's one I put in the chat that I really liked, but I was sick, had a head cold, couldn't do anything with it. And how I found him, on top of noticing when he does play, he gets 18, 19, 20 carries a game. Seattle rush D giving up 152 yards a game, most in the NFL. And then we had put the Rams at about 135 rushing yards, and his number was 69.5. And so he ended up somewhere around 75 to 80. I think he was at 77, and he had a couple more, but I don't know if he lost some runs. But he went over it. But I figured he's probably going to get 80, 90, and then Sony Michel is going to get 40, 50. They didn't quite get that high, but they were in that ballpark. But that's one thing that popped at me when I was looking at how many rush yards Seattle was allowing. So some of the ones that I like going forward, first one is let's look at Alvin Kamara. So what do you think his number is going to be at? So let's look at his game logs. Sorry. So game 1, he had 83, then nothing against Carolina. They played him really tough. So the last 2 weeks, let's really focus on. He had 89, and then he had 120. But what jumps out at me is 26 and 24 attempts. So he's had 50 rushing attempts, and this is basically to keep Winston from throwing the ball. So 50 rushing attempts, and even at 3.7, 4.6, he's putting up a lot of yards. I mean, 89 and 120. So we could safely say, he's going to get 20 to 22 rushing attempts and probably put up 80, 90, upwards of 100 yards. Now they're facing Washington this week, so let's look and see what the Washington defense looks like. So Washington's given up 118.5 rushing yards per game, and then we've got the Saints projected to put up about 140 total rushing yards. And Kamara's probably going to get the majority of them, so we could say, hey, we're going to peg him about 100 rush yards. Projection-wise, they got him down here at 86.6, so we'll say 87 yards. So what do you think his rushing yard number was at? So it came in at 78.5. Now, he's been over that in 3 of 4, and he's facing a mediocre rush defense, and he has 50 attempts in the last 2 weeks. So I like over 78.5. I think that one, not a gimme, but it's one that I am definitely going to have some action on. Now, the next one, let's move on, is James Robinson. So James Robinson started off crappy the first 2 weeks. I don't know what changed. They only gave him 5 and 11 attempts. 5 against Houston is just asinine. I don't know why they would do that. Denver's a really good rush defense. They're one of the tops in the NFL, so let's throw those games out. Now, they flipped a switch in these last 2 weeks, week 3 and 4 against Arizona and Cincinnati, decent defenses. They gave him 15 and 18 carries for 88 and 78 yards. So what I really like here is decent rush defenses he's been playing. He's averaging 4.3 to 5.9 yards per carry. So, I mean, even at 15 yards, at 4.5 yards a carry, that's 70 yards, somewhere in that ballpark. So with him putting up 78 and 88, this was a game that I wanted to kind of look at and see where his number would come in. So let's take a look at it on the cheat sheet. So we're going to go over here to Jacksonville. It's got a decent high total that slid down, but it's still 48.5. Tennessee's rush defense has been pretty solid, so that would be a red flag. Only 91.5 rush yards per game. They're 8th best, but they've actually been putting up 112. So somewhere around 100 yards is probably where we're going to be. Now, our model is going to project Jacksonville with around 93.7 rush yards. Well, his number came in. It looks like Prize Picks lowered the number due to the tougher rush defense that they were giving up, and it's only 61.5 yards. So with him putting up 88 and 78, 61.5 looks like a good number. And you can see Tennessee is giving up 3.9 yards per carry, and he's averaging 4.3 or better, so we could figure him for about 4 yards per carry, 15 carries. For an absolute floor is 60 yards, so anything more than that, he would squeak over. So I like that. If he broke one for 10 yards, it's money in the bank. So Robinson is definitely someone I'm going to have some action on. And I've got two more I'm going to look at so this video isn't ridiculously long. So we have James Conner. So James Conner, when you look at his game logs, you think, he's a split back for Arizona. But these last 2 weeks, he's had 11 carries for 43 yards. And then he's had 18 carries for 50 yards. But he's got 4 touchdowns. He's getting a lot of goal line carries. So I was looking for a fantasy point because, look, he has a target for 10 and then 2 for 16. So 18 and 20 fantasy points I really like because the number is going to be low. I could not find it when I looked last night on Price Picks. But looking at his rush yards, it was only 33 and a half. So he's had 53, 26, 43, and 50. 33 and a half is a really low number, and that's something that he easily could get over. And I mean, 16, 18. I mean, he has games where he has a lot of attempts. So I like that even at a low yard per carry. San Francisco's got a pretty decent run D, but let's go look at it. So San Fran, 16th, so they're kind of middle of the road, giving up 118 rush yards per game. We know Edmonds and Conner are going to carry the workload, and we've got them projected for about 144 combined rush yards. So Conner just over 33. Like, okay, I'll take the 33.5 number and go over it. If I lose it, that's fine. But if I get it, you could get it really early. I prefer fantasy points if you can find it, though. And then the last one I want to look at is Zach Moss. So this is someone I talked up in the chat a little bit for DFS, especially over Singletary. If you put him side by side, Moss is slowly starting to take over that backfield. He's usually 60-40 up on rushes, yards, targets, end zone carries. So they're slightly leaning a little bit more to Moss. He has 13 for 60 in week 3, and then he had 14 for 61 in week 4 last week. So 60 yards in both weeks. He's averaging a good yards per carry at 4.6 and 4.4. And who's he play this week? He plays Kansas City, who has one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. And this game has a total of 56.5 points. My word. Like, there's going to be some draw plays where he probably breaks one off for 30 yards. I could see that happening against Kansas City. But Kansas City, look at this. They're giving up 146 rush yards per game. I mean, we've got Buffalo projected at 181 rush yards. Now, given Singletary, Moss, and Allen, and then Diggs will get a couple carries around the side, it's going to be split up amongst a bunch of people. But if he's averaging 60 yards a game, I mean, what do you think Zach Moss's number is going up against Kansas City? So he's had 61 and 60 the last 2 weeks. He's going up against a team with a 56.5 total, and they are giving up the 30th most rushing yards per game. What should Zach Moss's number be on Price Picks? If you haven't looked, think of a number in your head. So to me, with 60 and 60 the last 2 weeks, going up against this defense, I could see this number being like 50.5. I thought would be a fair number. When I pulled up Price Picks, it was only 34.5 rush yards. So he has almost doubled that each of the last 2 weeks. And then he goes in this week with a total of 56.5 against a terrible run D. Like, how do you not get on that? But anyways, those are the games that I like. I think that's roughly about 15 different plays, so hopefully you can mix and match them. I planned on screenshotting my card that I had with my college games and my NFL games and show you those, but I didn't have time to get it off my phone. So anyways, I hope you guys like the video. Play Prize Picks, have some fun. If you do not have a Prize Pick account and you do want to sign up, I'll give you 2 free months of premium membership of Cheat Sheets. And my referral code here is PR-VUCTJ07. And I'll give you 2 months of Cheat Sheets if you sign up and use that code. But again, I hope you guys like the video. I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to put anything in the comments of plays you like, things you've noticed. I love the college ones. The college lines are soft, but it's so hard to dig through that many games and that many players when Prize Picks does not allow an export to CSV. So Thank you very much. You guys have a good weekend. And if we get a lot of views, we'll do this video first next week and put in some more plays. Thanks, guys.